recording this because we have people taking their quiz in another room, and I want to make sure they get a chance to see how to do this as well. Okay, so we have this little trifold completing the squares. It's going to be a pamphlet, and here's where I want you to start. Look at where it says completing the square. And along this edge of that sort of black stripe, right along that edge, we're going to fold, and we're going to fold it so that that goes toward the other side, kind of like this. So I'm going to fold that closed. And I do realize, by the way, that the other side, they're upside down from each other, and that's okay. But I want to fold it so that the edge of the black, where it says completing the square, is right at the edge of the sheet. Mine didn't quite make the edge. It's okay if yours is a little bit better than mine. Mine, you can see a little bit of white over here, but ideally right along the edge of this is where we're folding. Okay, and so that's like the outer part. Okay, then we're going to come over here and we're going to fold this part over that says examples, so that it says examples right beside completing the square. And so we have this nice little trifold packet where we have the completing the square and the examples. Like, here's how it would open. And yes, if you open it, it would be upside down. But that's how it's going to look. Okay. I'm going to change these problems. So let me go ahead and grab my one that I did earlier, because I'm not really that fond of their examples. Whoever came up with this lovely pamphlet, they did a very nice job of organizing it, but I don't love the examples. This example's not bad. But we're going to open it up and we're going to flip it over. We're going to turn it upside down so that it's now right side up, basically. And this first example right here with the minus 5x in the middle, we're going to get rid of that. And for this one, we're going to do x squared minus 8x plus 7 equals 0. Okay, so what we're doing when we complete the square is we're making it so that we can solve by square root. When we did solving by square root, we said, are all the x's inside something that's squared? And we said we can only do it in those cases. Well, now we're going to be able to do it anytime because we're going to be able to put it in that form. And that's what we're doing here. Okay, I'll show you again when we get there. Make that a little bit clearer. Step one here, the examples we're going to do today, we're not going to have to do step one because it says if a is not equal to 1. A is your leading coefficient. And if you don't see a number there, that means it is equal to 1. So this is going to be equal to 1. So I'm just going to leave that the way it is. Just going to rewrite it because a was already equal to 1. Step 2, it says rewrite the equation so that the constant term is alone on one side of the equal sign. So basically what that means is I'm going to take the 7, that's the constant. A constant means no variable, it means just a number. I'm going to take the 7 and I'm going to move it, but I like to do a little bit more when I do that. When I move it, and I'm just going to rewrite it and show my moving it here. In other words, I'm going to do minus 7 to both sides to get that to move. Minus 7, minus 7. I'm going to put a blank where it was. And because that blank is there, because I'm going to put something in there, anything you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I'm going to put a matching blank on the other side. So this to me is a very important step, is putting these matching blanks, moving the number to the other side and then putting in the matching blanks. Okay, because everything that we do next is about how to fill in those blanks. So step 3 says square half the coefficient of the x term and add this square to both sides of the equation. If you didn't have me here and you were just reading that, you might not know what the heck they're talking about. It's kind of weird to see. Okay, so first off, remember that the x part, the plain x part is what they're talking about, that term. The number in front of x, that's the coefficient. We often call that b. Okay, so we're talking about the b. So here we're talking about this. So we're focusing on this number. This is the b, or the coefficient of x. That's my b. That's the same thing. I'm going to take half of it. So I'm going to do -8 over 2 equals -4. And then I'm going to square that number. Squaring it means, -4 squared. Don't put that in your calculator without parentheses, remember, because -4 squared is positive 16. Anything squared is going to give you a positive, so make sure you remember that. If you type it in without parentheses, you might be tricked into thinking it would give you a negative, but it won't. Now, the reason we did all that, we took half of the b, this was the b, we took half of that and then squared it, is because that tells us what number is going in the blanks. So I'm going to rewrite this with the blanks so I can show putting it in there. So 16 is the number we came up with that needs to go in the blank. So 16 goes here and here. That's the number that goes in the blanks on both sides. Now, one thing I want to point out is right here when I said I'm going to take half of b, and it says in the directions half. I wrote that as that over 2. Dividing by 2 is the same as taking half. If you divide by 2, that's the same as multiplying by 1/2. There's a reason I wrote it this way that you'll see in a little while. Okay, so I put this over 2. All right, then we're going to factor this side. Here's the beauty of this. What we have done is we've set this up so that it is a perfect square, meaning it's some binomial squared, like x plus a number squared or x minus a number squared. And the number that we have set it up with is that one right there. Okay, in other words, if I went through all the process of factoring this, I would get x minus 4. But I don't have to go through the whole process because I know that that's always going to happen. Whatever I got when I took half of the b is going to be what goes right here. Always. Those are always going to match. So when you took half of your b, the number in front of x, whatever you got there is going to be part of the factored form of your left side. Okay, this is just the factored form of this. These are the same thing. This is expanded, this is multiplied out, and this is in factored form. On the right-hand side, notice it says simplify RHS. That means just simplify the right-hand side. So you have -7 plus 16, and that just gives me a 9. So the purpose of this is that we now have a question, or we now have it in a form that is just like that first problem on the quiz we just went over. We have the squared part alone on one side. So we can now solve this by taking the square root. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do in the last step. Everything up to here, this part is completing the square. This is a complete square. This is what we meant. This was the goal, is that we wanted to get it to where we had something that was a completely squared on this side, with everything inside of here completely squared, and then equal some number. So that's my completed square. And the last step is solving by square root. So I'm just going to rewrite it. And when I do this on my paper without these special boxes, I don't keep rewriting it over and over again. We'll do something like that in a little bit, you'll see. So square root, both sides, don't forget your plus or minus. This is just like the first question on the quiz. On the left side, we get x minus 4. On the right side, I get plus or minus 3. I need to get x by itself, so I'm going to move it, add 4 to both sides. That gives me a positive 4 on the right, plus or minus 3. So this is 4 plus 3, which is 7. And this is 4 minus 3, which is 1. Remember that in this step, if you can keep going, then you should. The only reason I wouldn't be able to keep going is if this was under the radical, and then I would stop. I would say, okay, it's plus or minus whatever that radical is. But 4 and 3 are like terms, and they could be added and they could be subtracted. Okay, we're going to do the same thing again on the next one. And again, I'm going to change the original problem. Still got a couple people writing. Let me just point out here, when I said this was taking half of the b term for step 3, sometimes the way we write that is we take the b and divide it by 2. That's the same as doing half, and then we're going to square it. That's what this is saying to do. Square half the b term. So that's what gets added to both sides. All right, next one, we're going to get rid of this. And we're going to get x squared minus 6x minus 3 equals 0. So again, the very first step, remember it says if a is not equal to 1, a is equal to 1. I don't have a number in front of x squared. That's what that means. There's no a here that's another number. So a is equal to 1. So I don't have to do anything there. So I'm ready to go to this step where I get rid of the number. I move the number to the other side and put a blank in its place and a matching blank on the other side. Okay, so let me rewrite this so I can do it in that box. I'm going to add 3 to both sides to get rid of it on the left. And I have x squared minus 6x plus blank equals 3 plus blank. Okay. All right, so the next step is filling in the blank, figuring out what's going to go in the blank. All right, so I take the b. This is the b. It includes the minus. If there's a minus in front of your b, that's included. So my b is negative 6. I take that, and I'm going to do half of that by dividing it by 2, and that gives me negative 3, which I'm going to show you what I was talking about earlier. As soon as I get that, as soon as I know that, I can jump down here and say, oh, okay, my factored form is going to be x minus 3. As soon as I took half of b, that tells me that the factored form is going to look like that. But I'm not done here. I need to fill in those blanks. So half of b and then square that number, which always gives me a positive. So I'm always adding to both sides. I'm never subtracting from both sides. It's always addition. So when I squared half of b, I got 9. So that means 9 is what's going to be added on both sides. So this is already set up to be factored. This is the factored form of that. Okay. If I were to multiply out x minus 3 all squared, I would get x squared minus 6x plus 9. This is just the factored form of that same expression. So on the right-hand side, that's where I just need to simplify. What's 3 plus 9? 12. Okay. So now I have, again, just like what we did last week. Now I have something where the x's are already in something squared. They're all ready to be solved by square root. So I'm ready to do that. I'm going to rewrite it and do it in the last box, though. All right. Don't forget your plus or minus. This time it's not going to just come out cleanly. Square root of 12 is not a whole number. So I'm going to have to reduce it, and I can do it whenever I want to. I'm going to leave this x minus 3 for right now equals plus or minus square root of 12. I could do it here if I wanted to. I'm going to get the x alone first before I do it. I'm going to add 3 to both sides, which basically moves the 3 over here as a positive. So x equals 3 plus or minus square root of 12, which means, let's go ahead and simplify square root of 12. Square root of 12 is square root of 4 times square root of 3. Square root of 4 is 2. So this is 3 plus or minus 2 root 3. This time those are not like terms, so I can't put them together. Okay? Next thing I'm going to give you some practice, and we're going to look at the problems at the top where we're just focused on finding this number, the number that gets filled in the blank on both sides. Yeah. Okay, so at the top of this sheet, I want to explain what they're asking for. Okay, it says find the value of C that completes the square. So it's basically saying C is like the fill in the blank. They could have just as easily said find the value that goes in the blank. It's just a different way of asking that same thing. Okay, saying find the value of C that would complete the square. In other words, that would make this a whole complete square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the B, remember this is the B, take half of that and get -4, and then square that number, and I get 16, so that's my answer. That's what they're asking, is they're asking what number would go in the blank on both sides. Now, sometimes when they ask this, they also will say, then write it as a binomial squared, meaning I could rewrite all of this. I could rewrite this as r minus 4 squared. Remember, this is -4. These mean the same thing. This is the expanded form. It's multiplied out, and this is the factored form. You don't have to do that, though. I just want you to recognize that's where that would go. This would go in the binomial squared. So we're just being asked, take the middle term here and find out what half of it is. That's 5. And then square that, and your answer is 25. 25 is the number I would multiply both sides, add to both sides, or the number that if I put it in here, it makes a complete square. The idea there is if I fill in a 25 right there, that's now a complete square. It's a perfect square trinomial because it is the same as r plus 5 squared. So it is a complete square. Okay, it's kind of like the polynomial version of like 16. 16 is 4 squared. It's something else squared. So we're trying to figure out what to fill in here to make this something else squared. So 24 divided by 2 is 12. And 12 squared is 144. Remember that the sign in front of B is part of B. So here B is -12 divided by 2 is -6. -6 squared is 36. All right, now we finally get to the one that it shows why I have been doing 1/2 times as divided by 2. Okay, 1/2 times the number is the same as dividing that number by 2. So like here, when you're ready to take half of B and B is an odd number, just write it over 2. That's it. That's half of B. 9 over 2 is half of B. And then if we want to square that, which we still have to for this question, then we square 9 over 2, which is 9 times 9 over 2 times 2. And that is my answer. So this is the half of B. This is the half of B squared. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video because I'm going to let everybody go ahead and do 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Okay, give you a couple of minutes to do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so I'm about to reveal the answers, so hit pause if you don't need to. There we go. Check your answers. These are the numbers that would be added to both sides to make it a complete square. Any questions? Yes. Nope, I'd rather you keep it as a regular fraction. Good question. We don't usually use mixed numbers much in high school math. The only time is maybe when we're graphing. It can be more convenient when we're graphing. So, okay, let's go ahead and do some of the ones at the bottom. This is where we're doing the entire process. And by the way, on worksheets like this, if you have different letters, I'm fine with you turning that into an X. That's not a big deal to me. Okay, or you could keep it a B. The only problem with B's is they look like sixes, so be careful about that. Okay, so now I want to show you, like what I said, I don't necessarily rewrite it this many times when I'm doing it without all these boxes. So here's what it looks like when I do it without all the boxes. First off, I know that this is 1, so I don't have to do anything about that. This is number 11. I just moved it up. Okay. Second, I'm going to move this number. I'm going to add the 10 to both sides to get it off of this side. In other words, that makes that a 0. So x squared minus 10x, and now I've moved it. It's not there anymore. It's over here. And remember, this is when I add the 2 matching blanks. Now I got to figure out what goes in the blanks. But in the process of finding that, that's when I can also find out what the factored form is going to look like. If I take this number and I say, okay, negative 10 is the B, half of that is negative 5, then I can interrupt my process of figuring out what goes here and here and say, oh, if half of that is negative 5, then this is what it's going to look like when it's factored. Those are going to be the same number. Always. Okay, now the next thing we were supposed to do back up here after we take half of it was square it. So I need to square it. This is negative 5 squared, goes into the both blanks. So 25 goes here and here. It's still important to do that for this side, because even though I know that the left side is going to factor to look like this, I don't know what this number is going to be until I've put in that. So 10 plus 25 is 35. And now I have completed the square and I'm ready to solve by square root. Okay, so I can take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. The left side, I just have x minus 5 equals plus or minus square root of 35. This cannot be simplified. So it's going to stay square root of 35, and I'm just going to bring this negative 5 over as a positive 5. I add 5 to both sides to move it over, and I get x equals 5 plus or minus square root of 35. And that is my answer. So that's number 11. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to do number 12. If the bell catches us at any point, I'm probably going to keep going after the bell and send this recording out, because that way you could see some more. All right, so number 12. I like m's, so I'm going to use the m. M squared plus 8m plus 15. First thing I need to do is move the 15. So when I move the 15, it looks like this. Blank and matching blank on the other side. Now this time my b is positive 8. So I'm going to take half of that. That gives me 4, which tells me that the factored form is going to be m plus 4. Don't forget the squared. It factors as a perfect square. And then take that 4 and square it, and I get 16 added on both sides. What's negative 15 plus 16? 1. Now I've completed the square, so I'm ready to take the square root to solve. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides, plus or minus. What's the square root of 1? You got it. Sometimes people forget that for some reason. It's almost like it's one of those, it's too easy, so it must be wrong things or something. I don't know. So now I have to get rid of the plus 4, so that brings a negative 4 to this side. So it's m equals negative 4 plus or minus 1. This can be simplified. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. Negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5. So those are my two answers. Okay, so let's keep going on here. We've got number 13 and number 14 here. Both of them have a leading coefficient of 1, so I don't have to worry about that. So I'll start by moving the constant term, the plain number, to the other side. So that gives me this. Notice I set up my blanks at the same time. I'm going to go ahead and make a little bit of a dividing line here. Okay, so now I need to figure out how to fill in the blanks. And so I take my b, which is positive 14, and I take half of that, which is 7, and I square it, and that's what goes here and here, 49 and 49. When I just had done the first part there, though, when I took half of b, whatever I get here, in other words, the same thing that gets squared and added on both sides, that's what this is going to factor as. This whole thing here factors as x plus 7. If it had been a negative 7, it'd be x minus 7. So whatever sign you have here, you have that same sign here. On this side, I just need to go ahead and put these numbers together. 51 plus 49 is 100. So now I have a nice complete square, a perfect square binomial. So we've got everything on one side is squared, which is our criteria for when it's time to take the square root of both sides, is if you have it down to where the whole squared part is alone, and I do. So I'm going to take the square root, both sides, and put plus or minus on the right-hand side. The square root here just lifts off the squaring, making it just x plus 7. Plus or minus square root of 100 is plus or minus 10. We're almost there, but x is not alone. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, which basically is the same as saying I move it over here and it becomes negative. Negative 7 plus or minus 10. Because I don't have a radical here, I can keep going. Negative 7 plus 10 equals 3. Negative 7 minus 10 equals negative 17. So those are my answers. Number 14 works very similarly. No leading coefficient, so I'm good to keep going. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 15 from both sides. X squared plus 16x plus, this is where I put the blanks in. And I'm making this, we're filling in the blank with a specific number that makes this a perfect square trinomial, so that it's something squared, x plus or minus some number squared. The way we figure that number out is we take half of this number, 16 divided by 2 is 8, and then we square that, and that's what goes in here. 8 squared is 64. Half of this number, which we got was 8, is what goes here, because 8 squared makes 64, and 8 plus 8 makes 16. So here we have negative 15 plus 64. That works out to 49, which is nice because it's a perfect square. And I'm ready to take the square root of both sides. Square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. X plus 8 equals plus or minus 7. And then I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. We put it in front of the plus or minus. And because I don't have radicals, I can go ahead and keep going. Negative 8 plus 7 is negative 1. Negative 8 minus 7 is negative 15. Okay, so your homework is to finish this sheet. This is your homework for the day we're working on the sheet. And I do want to point out, I want to give you a little bit of help on 19 and 20, tiny bit of help. Both of those are not in standard form to start. So basically here, we would need to move the 60 over there, but before that, we need to get this on the left. We need to get this in standard form, which would be this. This is standard form here. I would subtract 16x from both sides to get it in that form. But then we need to move the 60. So it's going to be x squared minus 16x plus blank equals negative 60 plus blank. And then we're ready to complete the square. This one, we already have the constant on the right. All we have to do to be ready to complete the square here is just to put the blanks in. It's already like started for us. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and put up the answers to these, answers only. You need to make sure on your homework you show your work too, that you can actually go all the way through the process. All right, it's not going to help you just to have the answers. So I'm going to put the answers up in just a second. You might want to hit pause if you don't want to see them yet. Come back and check them out when you are done. Okay, so here are your answers. So this means like for 15, x is 9 and x is 1. These are two different answers. For 16, you could have this one written as -1 plus or minus square root of 15. They separated it into plus and minus as separate answers, but you don't have to do that. Same thing down here. Let me go ahead and give you some more to practice, just in case you want them. Okay, so this is just me giving you a few more problems to try. So try this one, hit pause, try it. Then I'm going to reveal the answer. Here's another one. Hit pause and try it. There's the answer. Here's another one. Hit pause and try it. Answer coming in 3, 2, 1. Try this one. Answer coming in 3, 2, 1. Here's another. 3, 2, 1. There we go. Here's another. 3, 2, 1. There we go. Finally, one that doesn't have a square root in the answer. Two more. 3, 2, 1. Another one. And last one we're going to do. 3, 2, 1. There we go. Hope this has been helpful.